kind of give a disclaimer. So we talked a little bit, and I talked a little bit about how your storytellers are going to be telling their own personal stories of things that have happened to them. So with that comes vulnerability, with that comes rawness, and with that comes the reality of some of the horrible things that they have had to endure. So disclaimer warning that there may be some profanity. These speakers are recounting some of the hardest moments of their life. And there also will be discussions on sensitive topics such as death, suicide, and sexual assault and rape. So because these topics are sensitive, we do have resources here available if you feel like you need to talk or have a discussion. We have assist-trained caregivers who have been trained to do interventions and have those hard conversations, and most of them are over here on this left-hand side with the green lanyard. So if you feel like you need to have a conversation, please find them. Preferably on the intermission, but if in fact you do have to leave because of the sensitivity of the topic, one of them will go out just to make sure that you're doing okay. We also have, you guys, as you heard, we have some national crisis canines here, so their whole job is to be comfort in times of stress and times of crisis. So if you need to get some love from a furry friend, we please encourage you to do so. Again, intermission is a great time. We'll be standing out kind of waiting for you to get some doggy love. Thank you, Colonel Collins and Chief Davis and Chief Smith for being here today. The support from our leadership team has been amazing these past few months, and it continues to just show how important some of the stuff that you guys have been through and continue to do is to our leadership here at the wing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first storyteller. If you do need to leave in the middle, just know that we won't let you back in until after the story has concluded. It's kind of like the theater. So if you leave, we'll open the doors once the first story is over and the second story comes up, not to interrupt the process that they have going on up here. But our first storyteller is Staff Sergeant Joshua Jarman. He's from the 375th AES, and he's going to be kicking us off.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. I've been told I'm not enough. So yeah, as she said, I'm Staff Sergeant Jarman in our Aero Medical Evacuation Squadron. One of my favorite jobs I've ever gotten to do in the Air Force. So I'm a medical admin by trade. If y'all don't know what that is, it is basically a librarian or a secretary for the medical group. And I don't mean that in any malicious sense of the word. We do a lot of administrative work, and oftentimes we feel because of our impact into the mission that we don't really have an impact because of the type of work that we do. Luckily enough, right out of tech school, I was able to get assigned with RAF Lakenheath as my first assignment, and it was a really cool place to be able to get sent to. So I wanted to do and be one of the best and most seen individuals I could. I wanted to be gung-ho and do BTZ and everything. So within the first few months of being there, I had done over 700 hours of volunteer work. I had taken on being a youth minister and had been doing that 3 times a week for multiple hours a day after work in wing and group and squadron events on top of that. So we'll fast forward a little bit to after BTZ packages get submitted. I'm no longer working in a medical records department and am working in pediatrics, and was going out to go do some fitness tests. And I got sent an email from some of my friends. It was a joke email about why men shouldn't go shopping with women. Not necessarily something appropriate for the workplace, but something at that point in time, with my sense of humor, being an 18-year-old in England, thought was hilarious and should forward out to my friends. So I did what any responsible person would do, and I opened up my distro list labeled everyone and sent it to that and walked right out the door to go fitness test people for the next 3 hours. I came back to my inbox and opened it up to several hundred replies from the Pentagon. Apparently, when I selected the distro list, I did not select my everyone, but the Pentagon's everyone, and sent that email to the SecDef and the several hundred people within the Pentagon. So most of the responses were from generals or other individuals requesting to be pulled off of this email chain, and or at one point in time from one general, "That's fucking hilarious, how are things in USAFE?" So I was somewhere between wanting to die and crawl into a hole and never be seen again, and realizing I had just ruined my entire Air Force career, to doing, what should I do next? So I did the responsible thing, and I immediately started going through my entire chain and notifying everybody. I walked up through my supervisor, my flight commander, everybody, and when I got to the shirt, he berated me for some time and then shredded my below the zone approval in front of me. And then kicked me out of his office to stand at attention until he saw fit for me to re-enter his office. As a brand newish A1C, that was terrifying at the time, because I was pretty sure I was going to be separating from the military. Luckily, while I was standing there, the chief of the medical group, Chief Duenas, walks by, and he asks me what's going on, and I explain it to him. And when he finished laughing directly at me, he expressed that I need to relax, that he once did something very similar, nowhere near as bad, when he was initially stationed at Guam, just out to the commanders for the entire wing. So he told me to relax, go home, and that him and the shirt would continue to have a conversation. So there's not really much means to relaxing with that. You just kind of go home and wait for the phone call. So it was about 9 p.m. and Chief calls me and he's like, so here's the deal. Technically, there's no AFI written anywhere that states you cannot send jokes to the Pentagon or to the Secretary of Defense. But you did do that, so we're going to keep with the loss of the BTZ. The shirt wanted to give you an Article 15, but we can't do that, and we're not going to. And we'll just have you redo your information protection cert tomorrow when you come back into work. He said, aside from that, that'll be kind of where we just leave this. And I said, okay, cool, so I get to stay in the Air Force? And he's like, yes, you get to stay in the Air Force. So I tried to relax a little. Not long after, I had some friends over to my dorm room, and for the latter years in my high school life, I got to live with my stepmom and my father, who, she's Filipino, and she taught me how to make lumpia, a very favorite food within the military. And so I had my friends over, and we were getting ready to fry up some lumpia. I was working on other aspects of the meal, and I asked my friend, hey, can you pour some oil into the skillet, turn it up medium-high, and then we'll get frying these here in a minute. By the time I turned around, the oil burst into flames, and the kitchen was catching on fire very quickly. So I grabbed a lid to snuff it out. That lid had steam vents for vegetables or whatever, and didn't exactly do anything against the fire. So I sent her out of the dorm to call the fire department, and yeah, there's some of the damage and then the repair afterwards. I sent her out to go call the fire department while I ran down the hall, and I was in the Air Force's brand new quads at the time, which were the 4 bedrooms with the living room in the middle and no ventilation kitchen or windows in it whatsoever. Ran down the hall, saw the fire alarm, reached in and went to set it off and accidentally removed it from the wall, I think out of adrenaline and panic. Grabbed the fire extinguisher, went to run back and realized, oh, okay, it's November in England, I'm in shorts, a tank top, and exactly no shoes whatsoever, and my dorm room door just locked on me. So I had to run around the entirety of the building and go through the sliding glass doors. At this point, the smoke had built up so much that I had to crawl into the dorm room and across the living room into the kitchen, to where I emptied an entire fire extinguisher to put it out in the generalized location where I assumed the fire was. As I walk back out, the fire department chief is coming up, and the fire department's showing in, and they're coming in with the big fans and everything like that to get all the smoke and debris out of there. And the fire chief walks up and says, hi, I'm fire chief such, and I don't notice at the time my shirt is right behind him, and I go, hi, I'm fire starter Jarman, to which my shirt did not appreciate very much post the SecDef incident. So that leads us into a wing room inspection that was coming up, and I wanted to try to make amends. You know, after causing $10,000 in government damage, the fan melted from the inside of the unit from how hot it got. So I knew there was a wing room inspection coming up, and that our dorm could use some minor repairs, and I was running around the building during my lunch break, doing touch-ups with paint or, tightening nuts and bolts and everything like that. So my dorm room was in a bit of a disarray. It was covered in spray paint cans and tools and my lunch. And then I went back to work. When the wing commander came to do the dorm inspection, he was supposed to inspect the room directly across the hall from mine. And somehow, through miscommunication, ended up in my room. So I immediately failed a wing room inspection with the wing commander, seeing my place being trashed. So, just continued to be on a downhill stride about as fast as I could possibly run with my shirt. The dorm manager at that point in time was not too pleased with me because he thought that I was hitting on his girlfriend at that point, and we were just talking. So I'm back at work, and this is about a week or two later, and everything's kind of back to normal, and I got to go home and get into PT gear and go join for unit PT. I go to open up my dorm room door, and I hear croaking, and I immediately close the door. And I pause, and I reopen the door, and there are many, many frogs covering my entire dorm room during mating season. Apparently the dorm manager was so frustrated with me, he went to Scott Lake, and there's actually probably about a dozen more of those photos, and collected 40 plus frogs, broke into my room and poured them in there. That was a level of dislike that I had yet to reach before, aside from probably with the shirt. But yeah, so funny thing in England, you are not allowed to touch the wildlife. So when my supervision and security forces came through, we had to wait several hours for animal control to come through and collect the frogs. It was a very, very interesting experience, and for the longest time, I didn't live down the moniker Kermit, especially anytime I came on and off base with security forces. It was an interesting time. Continuing with my great luck, decided to go and decompress out with some friends the next weekend, and we went out to Cambridge, and out there you can rent a gondola, and you can just kind of get the stick and push it yourself, or you can have somebody hired to do it for you. We hired somebody, so I laid out across the front, just legs hanging over the front of the boat, as relaxed as possible, while a pair of drunk individuals, you can go to the next one if you want, decided to ram theirs as fast as possible towards our boat, and that's me folded in half with another boat being pulled off of me, while all of my friends decided, instead of assisting me in any way, to stop and take photos of the whole situation, which part of me appreciates because I don't think most people would believe this. That evening, I went to go cook dinner for a friend of mine, and as I got into the elevator broke down. After being in there for about half an hour, I finally figured out how to pry the doors open, and somebody else came walking by, and I asked them to take a photo because I said, nobody will absolutely believe me that this ever happened. So I try to come with as much photo evidence for everything as possible. Suffice to say, at that point in time, I kind of, and it wasn't the right answer, but I took up drinking as a hobby because it was the way I thought that I should be dealing with my problems, because I felt that there was no way I could get out of this downhill slope of continuing to just have bad luck over and over and over again. And so it wasn't until my brother's graduation that I had blacked out that I realized I should probably peel back and stop doing this. And at that point, I was brand new senior airman. And so I went bone dry and stopped drinking for about the next 4 to 6 months until I learned to reteach myself that you can drink within moderation or just not drink at all at certain events and just still have a good time. So my leadership thought, let's get this guy sent out to Iraq. That sounds like a good time. So then I got sent out to Iraq for the shutdown of Balad, which was an interesting experience. After all of those incidents and all of those struggles going through, I got to go out there, and we got mortared, I think, about 174 separate attacks, and we got shot at on at least 3 separate occasions. And it wasn't something I think I was mentally prepared for. When we went out there and you get told that you're going to go on a deployment, you don't really think about that aspect of it. You think that I'm going to be in the desert with limited access to things. You don't think about the fact that I'm going to learn how to sleep through an explosion because I need sleep stuff. You don't sit and think that you're going to have a weapon on you 24/7 loaded and ready to go because the base is shutting down and we don't know when another attack is going to happen. So it caused for a lot of stress and eventual strength to get through that, and a lot of leaning on your peers and coworkers to kind of help you and be there for each other through it all, especially when you are having limited access to be able to contact family. So now I get to get sent to Spangdahlem, Germany after I came back from Iraq, which was really cool because I went to Bitburg for middle school as a dependent prior to. Spangdahlem's where eventually I meet my wife, and she informs me, and so do a great many other people, that they've all heard of me before. My wife learned about me in her FTAC class as an instruction to not send sexist jokes to the Pentagon and the Secretary of Defense, among other things. And apparently there was many emails that went out across USAFE as a lesson to teach other people that this is not an appropriate thing to do. But about 6 months into being at Spangdahlem, I got tasked with another deployment. Big air quotes on that one, because if you've ever been to Germany, I got tasked from Spangdahlem to Ramstein, which is 54 minutes down the road. And so I was very much confused as to what my mission was going to be. I got tasked with working the CASIV, which was my very first introduction to aeromedical anything. During my 6 months time at CASIV, it is a contingency aeromedical staging facility, and that's where we would process individuals coming back from downrange from a litany of injuries or issues that were going on. Missing appendages, burns from head to toe, self-inflicted wounds, suicidal ideations, mental health breakdowns, and a couple of times war criminals. It was a very interesting experience being admin. As I said, we're normally the secretaries or the administrative workers of the medical group, so getting the actual opportunity to put hands on litters and carry patients and help care for patients, and to be told at times that some of the individuals that you're carrying, are only kept on life support so their family can make it back that night and tell them bye. That was harder than being mortared. That was harder than being shot at. It was harder than pretty much anything else. You stand at the head of a brother or sister, and they're connected to 5 or 6 devices, and they're not there. And they're just kept alive. Even harder than that was the next day when the family wanted to come through and thank us. We didn't do anything, it felt like. We couldn't at that point in time. They were already too far gone. So, dealing with that, you try to find solace or support in your coworkers, and I found one best friend of mine named Vala. And man, were we like 2 peas in a pod? We did everything together. Any tough day like that, at the end of the day, we'd go out and we'd grab a bite to eat somewhere, go catch a movie, go wander around, anything to kind of talk about it and decompress from the whole situation. After that mission, I got sent back to Spangdahlem, went through ALS, and met my wife at the same time. Vala got to meet my first child, got to know my wife really well, and then him and I both got an assignment shortly after that. My wife and I had the standard marriage during this time, as far as the Air Force is concerned. We met Halloween night, and we were married Christmas Day of the same year. So that way we could get orders together. So when I got orders, we got orders. Vala got orders too, and we both went stateside. I went to Edwards Air Force Base, which was probably one of the most toughest times in my career. I know toxic leadership gets tossed around a lot, but I'll put it this way, at no point in time in my career prior to that have I ever seen my flight chief try to break my superintendent's face and put 3 holes in the wall before being restrained and pulled off of each other. It was a tough environment to work in, and a lot of it was very much that in a medical facility, let alone. So one day at work, I get a bunch of calls from my friends, and they're asking me, hey, did you hear what happened? What's going on with Bala? What do you mean what's going on with Bala? I have no idea. And they're like, well, can you find out? Because you two are best friends. Like, you should know more than anybody. And I was like, well, what's being said? And they're saying he took his life. And I'm like, absolutely not. Happiest guy I ever met in my entire life. So I called his unit. I just looked him up in Global, found people in his area. And they're like, oh, we can't tell you anything. That's HIPAA. And I keep calling and I keep trying to talk to somebody else, and I finally get a hold of somebody. I believe it was his supervisor at the time. I was look, I understand that we have to tell families first, and I understand HIPAA, and I understand how very tight-lipped we get around suicide. I just need to know if my friend is still with us. And she said, he's no longer with us. So I left my information behind, said if anything comes out in the future that I can help with, or anything like that, I would love to be a part of it. I got to know Bala's family, which was an interesting experience, because my understanding he was disowned by them for joining the military. It's weird to talk to somebody who, from all that you know, didn't even want them to try to arrange funeral services to transport him from the States back to India. It was tough. It was surreal. And when I found out this information that he had taken his life at work that day, and when I needed to make those calls, I went to ask my supervisor, Sergeant DeSormo. I said, hey, I need to go talk because I think my friend's dead. I need to make some calls. And he's like, it's not that big of a deal if he's dead already. You can have 15 minutes, and then we need you back in the office. When I told this story the other day, something to the effect of, I hope he got what he deserved, was said. He did. He's a chief now. Continuing to, I hope, grow from that situation and not talk to somebody like that at that point in time now. Because that was a tough moment for me to just walk out without saying anything more. My wife and I, at that point in time, were talking about separating from the military. I was just hitting my 10-year mark, and with the way things were going at Edwards, it didn't seem like something we wanted to do anymore. We got the opportunity to move to Scott in 2018. We got the opportunity to move to Scott in 2018, and when we moved here, my new leadership and I, it took me a minute to trust them, just from previous experiences. And I didn't know what to do. But I got Sergeant Walthall, who's now Chief Walthall. He was my supervisor, and man, did we hit it off. Him and Tech Sergeant Gross. Sergeant Walthall and I both initially realized we were both born at the same base that was shut down due to Desert Storm in Greece. So that was first stepping stone to me going, oh, okay, maybe somebody's a little bit like me. Maybe they understand dependent life, and then coming back to the military and going through all this. And he did, man. He was there for me and my family with anything that we really needed. And, he shortly thereafter leaves, and I get a new supervisor, and I get tasked with another deployment, this time to Kuwait, which I am stoked for. We get about a 6-month notice, and then a couple months into it, I end up in the emergency room multiple times over the weekend due to neurological issues, having migraines so severe I couldn't walk, and then being hit with cluster migraines the following day. Since then, it's all been gotten under control with medication. But because of that, I got put on red line medication initially that disqualified me from my deployment 88 days out from the deployment, which meant somebody else had to be tasked. So my leadership took that as me trying to scapegoat out of a deployment and rated me not ready now for a promotion, which then hindered the next couple of promotion cycles where I would have promoted to tech sergeant. But that's not really where I sit and focus on. It sucked. It hurt. A lot of the other problems that I had, I just kind of put them all to the side and focused on that I should take the lessons from good people and continue to press. I changed departments, and a new supervisor reviews my record, and she doesn't understand it. There's nothing in my PIF, there's no historical anything showing that anything's bad. So she brings it up to the squadron commander, and they fight it at higher headquarters to have it removed multiple times, and higher headquarters says no. This whole time I continue to just press, take care of my people. I had 9 troops at that point in time. I just wanted to make sure I could do the best for them and be a good supervisor, help them in any way that I could. They pushed so hard to try to get me promoted still that my current commander actually took the previous commander out to lunch, who had since retired, and asked him, hey, can I get you to write a letter or rescind this? And he said, I don't make mistakes. So that was kind of the end of that. And I just resigned to accept it and continue to attempt to test and do whatever I can to promote again. Since then, I have managed more departments than I can shake a stick at and been over more airmen than I can physically count. And I've deployed multiple more times since I've been at Scott. I got lucky enough to be on the FEMA missions and go work and do COVID vaccines. And that was a terse time for people on whether or not they wanted to accept the vaccines, and being interesting, being active duty in civilian sectors doing that, to doing the Allies Welcome mission, where it was brought up that when we were going out there, there was no information as to what we were going to do. And we arrived there, and they have the first night's meeting. They explained to everybody, hey, so all of these individuals, they didn't have vaccines. Some of them were heavily injured getting on aircrafts, shot. We have at least one individual that we currently know of that was hit in the spine and is now in a wheelchair. And so now they have medical documentation, medical records. We are lucky to have a manager for medical records department that will be here and is going to guide us through the process and what we're going to do. Sergeant Jarman, would you please come up? And I said, sorry, nobody had briefed me on anything prior to coming here. All I had gotten was that I needed to fly to Philadelphia and be at this meeting. The next 24 hours, I spent more time talking to 3-letter agencies and stars and gaining access to systems and programs that I didn't even know existed to be able to determine for America what was going to be HIPAA for all of the allies welcomes that were going to be coming through, 16,000 individuals, and how all of that documentation is going to be processed and passed on. I say this to bring up that through all of the struggles, there's been good times and there's been amazing times in my Air Force career. I look back at the times at the CASIF with my friends. I look back at the times with the CASIF of carrying people. I look at Iraq and all of the struggles and everything that I've been through, and I take those moments as pearls of wisdom and put them out towards my people as how I lead. I take care of my people first, and mission will always be there and always be taken care of as well. But if we can't have our people taken care of, then they can't do their job properly. So I have a litany of people that I could thank for that. literally the list would be 3 times longer than this page right here. It's actually, I thank Paula as one of my main ones, because since him, I have taught suicide prevention for 10 years. Since his loss, I spent a lot of time blaming myself and not knowing what to do and where to go and why. So I took that opportunity and started teaching suicide prevention from there forward to make sure to hand it on. So every instance of my career has guided who I am and how I lead, and that the struggles that I've gone through don't hold me here, but make me better for the next individual so I can make them better for the next person up. And I just, before I wrap up, I want to thank my family for being there to support me through all of it as well. Because there's been a lot of low times, but there's been a lot of great times that we've been able to be together and do some amazing things together. And now I get to wrap up the remaining 3 years of my career doing my favorite job of all time over at our medical evacuation.